Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. We promote positive method of training and behavior modification through stress-free methods. As part of that mission, we offer free webinars like the one you're about to watch. Subjects range from dog behavior, stress-free training, and other tools to help you understand your relationship with your dog. If you liked the webinar, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Click the notification bell and subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll be notified when future videos are posted. Now enjoy the webinar.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, No Time to Train, No Problem, sponsored by Your Dog's Friend, a nonprofit 501c3 whose mission is to help keep dogs out of shelters by educating and supporting their humans. Since 2006, we've been promoting the use of positive training methods by hosting free webinars like this one, posting valuable resources on our website, offering affordable training classes in person and online, and providing free advice and referrals. We're passionate about our mission, so we hope you will enjoy this webinar and spread the word about Your Dog's Friend. My name is Carrie Hoare, and I'm a volunteer with Your Dog's Friend, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Our speaker today is Juliana DeWillems. Juliana is the founder and lead trainer of JW Dog Training, serving the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area, primarily located in Arlington, Virginia, and Northwest Washington, D.C. Juliana is also on the faculty of the Karen Pryor Academy, a top program for positive dog trainers. She has numerous certifications, including the Karen Pryor Academy Certified Training Partner certification, Certified Behavior Consultant for Canines, and Certified Dog Behavior Training Consultant. She has presented a number of webinars for Your Dog's Friend, and we're always happy and delighted to have her back. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you that Your Dog's Friend is a nonprofit, so if you find this webinar helpful, please consider making a donation so that we can help provide more of these free webinars and other free resources. If you'd like to donate, you can visit our website at yourdogsfriend.org and click on the donate button in the upper right-hand corner. We really appreciate your support as we go along. And let's get started with today's webinar. So I'm sure everybody is super interested in hearing about this topic. I know I am. So over to you, Juliana.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Really appreciate it. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. I am, as Carrie mentioned, based in the Washington, D.C. area. My business is JW Dog Training. I know a lot of you probably from Instagram, JW Dog Training. We post a ton on there. My business is mostly private lesson focused, and we work with everything from new puppies to rescue dogs to fear, anxiety, aggression. So we really see it all. And we apply the technique that I am going to talk about tonight, capturing, to pretty much every behavior issue that we see as a really great, one of the great ways to address it and change and improve behaviors. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and get started. All right. Now, we needed a catchy title to lure you all in to talk about capturing. So that's where we got the concept of No Time to Train, because as you'll learn in this webinar, capturing focuses on basically rewarding behaviors that your dog offers unprompted. So you might not necessarily be in a training session, but I'm going to train you how to be on the lookout for desirable behaviors from your dog. And we're going to dive into a ton of different examples of this, why this is important. This is a very video heavy presentation, which I'm happy about. The last time I gave this presentation was, my goodness, 3 years ago, probably. So some of my thought process has changed in those 3 years, which you would hope with any professional, that our kind of thoughts evolve as we learn more. So I updated it a little bit, but otherwise the information is evergreen and the videos are really great and I think helpful for hitting my point home. So that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. So I saw this quote from a colleague of mine, Michael's Dogs, and it says, Teach your dog to make good choices on his own. That's the difference between a well-mannered dog and one who just listens to quote unquote commands. We call them cues. But this really hit home to me because I said, yeah, I love a dog who thinks on their own and makes desirable choices on their own, that I don't always have to tell what to do and when. And that's really what this whole presentation is about. And so if this doesn't make any sense to you, it better by the end of this talk. So most of us understand the concept of giving our dogs cues: sit, stay, down, leave it, come. When we think about dog training, we think about teaching our dogs cues. And on the left here, you see a dog responding to a cue. This person is holding up a treat and their hand is in that hand signal sit position. And the dog is saying, okay, I see that signal, I'm going to sit. And this picture on the right here is a dog who, unprompted, the guardian is staring at the camera, so not engaging with the dog, but the dog is still choosing to look up at the person. And that's kind of the difference of the two, is that unprompted, this dog on the right is looking up, giving eye contact, giving attention and focusing without hearing or seeing any cues from the guardian. And the dog on the left is really focused, but responding to a cue. So we're going to talk about kind of this picture on the right here and building desirable habits that our dog just does and offers without being prompted. Because when you rely on cues alone to, we'll say, communicate to your dog what you want, or you rely on cues alone to help your dog understand what you want from them, it can lead to a lot of nagging your dog. So you're constantly telling them, leave it, leave it, leave it, or, Fluffy, come, come, come. And you're constantly nagging at them with information about what you want them to do, which can also lead to what we might call micromanaging, where you are constantly having to say, no, don't do that. Do this, come here, move here, do this. And you're giving your dog a lot of information constantly because you're having to micromanage their every move. And really, that can just be a lot of work. A big reason why I love the concept of capturing is that I actually don't have to do as much. I do a lot of observing and I do a lot of rewarding, but other than that, I don't have to be constantly giving my dog a lot of information through verbal or visual cues. So there is a more effective way than relying on cues alone to help your dog understand what you want from them. Now, in order to talk about capturing, we have to understand how behavior works and how and what dogs are learning. Because for better or worse, dogs are always learning. They are not only learning during a training session. Sure, you might work on specific things during a training session, but all day, every day, dogs are learning what specific behaviors lead to what specific outcomes, and that will influence their behavior in the future. So what you want to ask yourself is, what are we teaching? What are we teaching our dogs in their day-to-day life with us? And every single interaction and every single situation, what are our dogs learning? Both from us, which is what we have most control over, and then also from the environment, which we have more control over than we think. But what are our dogs learning when it comes to the outcomes that are attached to their behavior all day long? Dogs do what works for them, in the sense that if a certain behavior leads to a desirable and reinforcing outcome, they will do more of it. And, we can label this all sorts of different ways. Opportunistic, I would label it smart. But really, all animals evolved to behave in ways that work for them, that behave in ways that access outcomes that they're looking for. With dogs, that might look like pulling, because if they're pulling and they get to pull up to another dog or pull up to a tasty scent, well, that pulling just worked out really well for them. Counter surfing. If there are treasures left on the counter and our dog hops up with their front paws and snags something, oh, that sure worked out quite well for them. So there is almost no universe where we could expect dogs to not engage in what works for them, especially initially before we put any behavior modification into place. Dogs they were really designed to do what works for them, as were all living organisms. Here's an example of, the puppy stole something and the child is running after the puppy, and what worked there was creating a wonderfully fun and enriching game of chase. So that stealing really, well, what we would label as stealing, that behavior of grabbing an item and running away from the human worked really well to get a really fun game of chase. And that is just the facts. So behavior science tells us that dogs are going to do what works for them, what leads to positive, desirable outcomes for them that reinforce the behavior. The key to understanding how to get more behavior from your dog is understanding that reinforcement, meaning a consequence that comes after the behavior that increases the behavior, reinforcement is what drives behavior. So you have any behavior that your dog does, and you add what, most people call rewards. In the science and dog training world, we call reinforcement. If you add something good to after the behavior, then you are likely to see an increase in that behavior. And this concept is critical to understand, because this happens for stuff that we want to see increased, behaviors we want to see more of, but also behaviors that we might not want to see more of, but there is something reinforcing happening, and therefore the behavior is continuing. This is also important to understand, because if you are wanting to see more of a specific behavior from your dog, and you're not seeing the behavior happen with more frequency, it's because whatever you're trying to do to reinforce the behavior it's not enough, it's not effective, it's not working. This is why when somebody says, I tried positive reinforcement and it didn't work, unfortunately, that is untrue, because if it wasn't increasing the behavior, it actually wasn't reinforcement. So it wasn't positive reinforcement. You can give treats after a behavior, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have used positive reinforcement and reinforced the behavior to see more of it in the future. So this is a concept that is critical to understand, because it helps you figure out why behavior is happening, and also why behavior that might not be happening when you want it to. I like to think of behavior options that our dogs have as bank accounts. And every time you reinforce or reward a certain behavior, you're depositing into that bank account. And dogs, because like we said, dogs do what works for them, they are going to pull from the bank accounts that have the strongest, heaviest reinforcement, that have the most reward deposited into it. So for example, every time your dog sits, you might, or not every time, sometimes your dog sits, you might give him a scratch, try to give him a little reward every once in a while. So you have a few pennies in that bank account. And then when your dog gives you eye contact, sometimes you reinforce that. You talk to them, you smile at them, maybe you pet them. You have a few more pennies in that bank account. But if your dog jumps, you might have accidentally heavily reinforced that through looking at your dog, talking to them, smiling at them 100% of the time, which happens out of necessity because we can't ignore jumping because it can become unsafe a lot of the time. And so if you think about which behavior has worked most for the dog, this dog in the example, looking at how much each behavior has been rewarded, which behavior is the dog going to opt for most frequently? Jumping, at least under certain conditions. There are, of course, like everything with dog training, many nuances to this concept, and I am kind of pulling it back and simplifying it for the sake of this, packaging it nicely for this course. Understand that there are, of course, so much more. There's so much more that we can learn about this topic and about behavior, but this is me packaging it into a nice, understandable concept for the sake of this talk. So let's talk about what reinforcement can look like. And this is from you, the guardian, the owner, how you can possibly reinforce behavior. And one thing I want to say before I dive into this is that dogs, the learner, so your dog is who chooses what is reinforcing. So you might say, well, I paid my dog attention. I petted my dog when he came up to me, but I didn't see him. He's still not coming when I call him every time. Well, in that case, petting isn't actually reinforcing. We don't get to decide. We can certainly try to reinforce behavior using certain reinforcers, rewards, but we really have to look to our dogs to tell us what they find reinforcing. So food, this is the most obvious answer. Yes, I guess you guys could all see my cat on my screen. I don't like being the type of person to pause for technical difficulties, but the cat Till's pretty cute. She's a kitten. She's only 4 months old, and I'm learning it is very reinforcing to her to be on me and near me when I'm doing Zoom calls, which I find also quite reinforcing. I think it's adorable, so I don't change the behavior. So she clicked forward for me. Food is our most easily accessible reinforcer, and we use it a lot in training because we have a lot of options for variation. You can have low, medium, high value food. It's easy to give your dog frequently, which is often what's needed. It's just the most accessible. Oh, dogs are designed to like and want to work for food. So their food is a very easy reinforcer that we use across the board. Now, of course, praise and attention can also be reinforcing. I don't think it works as reinforcing as many people like to think that it is when they insist on using praise instead of food. I think, at least in a lot of situations, I think like humans, dogs find that there is a time and place that they enjoy petting and a type of petting that they like more than others. So walking up to them and patting them on the head, unlikely to be super reinforcing for them, but getting in a nice massage on the couch at the end of the day and cuddling up with you, they might like that a lot, but that's harder to apply as a reinforcer. I really urge you to really get curious about if you are relying on praise and attention to reward behaviors, because generally that's not, there are a lot of times if you're intentionally trying to increase a behavior where that might not be enough. And play obviously can be super reinforcing for a lot of dogs. Tug, tossing a ball for them. There's a lot of ways that you can play with your dog and reinforce whatever behavior happened before the play, or you can reinforce behaviors within play and use play as a really great opportunity for training. So these are just some of the reinforcement options. Now, it's important to understand the environment can also have tons of reinforcers. And in fact, the environment can be way more reinforcing than humans a lot of the time. So for example, like before with the loose leash walking, the environment is full of sniffs and smells and visuals and all this stuff that our dogs love to take in and explore and experience. And so that environment can be very, very reinforcing. What would be another example of, you know, the environment being reinforcing? Well, something even simple as getting to curl up into a cuddly, really comfortable bed is really reinforcing, can be really reinforcing. And so whatever behaviors lead to that outcome are going to happen more frequently. So there are reinforcers happening across the board, but as a human, these are the ones that we can generally offer and use to our advantage. So speaking of attention as a reward, we're going to go dive into this quickly and talk about it. So if you're ignoring your dog, there is generally no reinforcement coming from you. Meaning you're not petting them, you're not looking at them, you're not talking to them, there's no reinforcement coming from you. If you're praising them, of course, a lot of times under a lot of conditions, showering them with all this attention could potentially be reinforcement from you. And saying no, so, you know, oh, fluffy, bad dog, walking up to them. I want you to look at praising and saying no. These are two pictures that, yes, I have a different facial expression on, but I'm still orienting to my dog. I'm looking at them. And so there actually could be accidental reinforcement coming from me, even if I think I'm trying to convey no, bad dog, don't do that. It's still attention, and therefore it still could, depending on the dog, depending on the circumstances, could be reinforcing. This is one of the many reasons why I don't rely on no to impact behavior, because unless I'm really kind of scaring and traumatizing my dog, there is a chance that every time I say no, I'm just accidentally reinforcing whatever behavior is occurring. So the reason that it's important to understand how our behavior can impact our dog's behavior is because we are so frequently interacting with our dogs, that we are constantly giving them information about what behaviors work and don't work. And we have to understand how our role plays in that, whether we're intentionally giving a treat or unintentionally, we're not trying to convey a message, but we actually are. It's important to understand that. If you are being stingy with your reinforcement, your dog's desirable behavior won't get stronger. Meaning, if you have a behavior that you want to see more of, and you are not thoughtful and mindful about reinforcing your dog adequately for that behavior, then the behavior will not get stronger. And that is, I am just the messenger of the science. And understanding that, just like I showed you before with the arrow of the behaviors, is really important, because if you're not seeing a behavior from your dog that you want to be seeing, you're going to ask yourself, well, wait a second, am I reinforcing enough? Now, I'm going to show you what it looks like when we take a lot of rewarding, called a high rate of reinforcement, so strong reinforcement, and how that turns into a nice, strong behavior over time.
Yes. 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 Good job.
So you watched how a lot of reinforcement, this is where people really, loose leash walking is a tricky one, but I reinforced the heck out of the walking initially. And over time, it turned into a really lovely walk next to me behavior that maintained. So let me actually see if I can move. That's fine. Reinforcement histories, meaning how much you reinforce your dog for specific behaviors, can create what we label and what we call default behaviors. So those behaviors are going to occur more frequently because they have been so heavily reinforced. And they can become default behaviors that your dog offers without you prompting them. Can you think of any? I want you to think about any behaviors that your dog has that might be default behaviors, meaning they just default to those regardless of what you have done or what you have asked of them. They start, some dogs start going through all their trick repertoire. These are behaviors that they just do because they have been reinforced and they know that they're going to lead to a positive consequence. So this is what brings us to the concept of capturing. Capturing is a training technique similar to luring or the term shaping, if you've heard that, where you are rewarding behaviors that your dog does naturally on their own without being cued by you. So you're not giving information with a verbal cue or an intentional hand signal cue. And so capturing is where you're looking for behaviors that your dog just does, because our dogs are behaving so much, meaning they do so many behaviors all the time. We're just not necessarily programmed to look for the ones that we want. But capturing, you're going to reward your dog for doing behaviors that you like and that you want to see more of, but you haven't asked for. In the human world, we actually use capturing quite a bit, and you might just not realize it. So for example, if you come into the room and your partner is doing the dishes and you say, "Hey, thanks for doing that." That's capturing because you didn't necessarily say, "Hey, can you do the dishes for me?" And then your partner does them and then you reinforce them. You're capturing them doing the behavior of the dishes, which you really liked, and you thank them for that, which for a lot of people is going to be reinforcing and increase the chances that the behavior of doing the dishes occurs in the future. In the workplace, "Hey, I really liked that presentation that you did." You didn't necessarily ask them to do X, Y, and Z in the presentation, but you found certain things in the presentation that you liked and you mentioned it to the person, you reinforced them for it. So you might see more of those behaviors in the future. "Hey, I really like how you organized that presentation. Hey, I really liked how you wrote that report." You are seeing behaviors that you like from your colleagues. You are acknowledging them, praising the person for them, but you didn't necessarily say, "Hey, can you write the report like this?" Person does it and then you reinforce them. That, of course, happens all the time as well, but that's more of the traditional, what we think of. You cue something, somebody responds accordingly, and you reinforce them for it. This is, you're not cueing anything. You're not necessarily asking for anything specific. You are just capturing what your colleague did that you liked. You're noticing it and you're reinforcing them for it. This one, depending on what kind of driver you are, this may or may not resonate with you, but if you let a driver merge in front of you and they, wave to you and say, "Hey, thanks for doing that." Yes, I guess, for some people, a blinker indicates, "Hey, I'd like to get over. Can you let me in?" Not everybody interprets it that way, and not everybody uses their blinker. But if somebody on the road does something helpful, they let you in, they slow down for you, whatever it is, and you do the wave, "Hey, thanks for doing that." That's capturing because you didn't necessarily cue it, you didn't necessarily ask for it, but you saw something that somebody did that you liked, and you reinforced them for it. Understanding how we use it in the human world is really helpful because we do it all day long, especially if you are somebody who embraces more of a positive reinforcement mindset, and it can help us understand how to do it with our dogs as well. when to use capturing, when to use this technique versus, again, other techniques, again, would be luring, where, you know, you use a treat to ask a dog to do something, or shaping, or cueing, what, you know, sit, stay, down. Those are all other quote unquote techniques. So when would you capture behavior? I like to use capturing to build a foundation of attention before I teach specific behaviors and cues, so that my dog pays close attention to me before I introduce sit, stay, down, come. When you want to see more of a specific behavior from your dog, but you don't want to have to ask for it every time. So if you want your dog to, what would be an example of this? If you like your dog lying on their dog bed, if an example of capturing would be anytime they're on their bed, you go and slip them a little treat, give them a nice little snuggle. That would be capturing the behavior of them going on their bed, which increases the chances that they're on their bed more frequently. That might be a behavior you like because maybe you need to get them off the couch for some reason, or maybe it helps to calm them down. So there's a number of reasons for it. But if you're wanting to see more of a specific behavior, it can be helpful to capture it, so you're not having to always cue it. I think capturing is a great way to build what we would label as engagement. So dogs looking at us, engaging with us, waiting for information from us, paying attention to us. These are all under the umbrella of engagement. Capturing, I think, is really helpful for this. Goes back to kind of the nagging piece, where I don't want to have to always nag for attention and engagement. I want the dog to choose to offer it. And then I think capturing can be really helpful when you are working with a new dog who might not have any training, or you don't know their training. If you rely only on cues like sit, down, that type of thing, and suddenly you're working or you're around a dog who you have no idea what history they have, or they don't know those cues, you still need a way to communicate to them and build desirable behavior. So I just think capturing it's great. It is an extremely effective way to interact with our dogs. It is, I love it. I use it every day with my training. The thing about capturing is that it does require a mindset shift. Instead of relying on your dog responding to cues from you, you have to be the one to observe and look for desirable choices that your dog makes and be ready to reward them. Whether that is having a treat jar around that you grab a treat from a couple of times a day when you notice your dog doing something you like, or making sure that you're paying a ton of attention to your dog when they do something you like. It does require kind of that mindset shift. We are a society of punishment, unfortunately. We love punishment. We are programmed to wait for our dog to do something wrong and then act, which unfortunately means we have missed a whole bunch of stuff, positive, wonderful, desirable choices our dogs have made. We're just not as programmed to notice those or to do something about them. We wait till they mess up and then we act. And that can just lead to a frustrating, contentious relationship with our dogs. Whereas if we try to catch them doing stuff that we like and building positive behaviors that way, it's a much more positive and enriching relationship. So we're going to talk a little bit about capturing behaviors and pairing it with reinforcement and what we expect to see to behaviors. So, all right, our dog is standing quietly and we ignore them. I put green around, I don't know, behaviors we like, red around behaviors we don't like, or quote unquote negative consequences our dogs are likely to perceive as unpleasant or unwanted. So if our dog's on the floor and we ignore them, or standing in the context of a greeting, they're less likely to stand quietly and politely. If a dog jumps up on, we'll say this is the context of guests being over. So if a dog jumps up on a guest or on a person and we touch them, we talk to them, which remember, we said were aspects of both praising our dog and saying no to our dog, both include touching them and talking to them a lot of the time. So this box could be interpreted as we're saying, oh, good boy, or hey, Fluffy, bad dog, get off, Fluffy. Either way, we're kind of providing them with that consequence they're looking for. So you're likely to see an increase in the jumping behavior. Now, if your dog is standing quietly in the context of a greeting, a guest comes in and everyone showers them with attention. Oh, Fluffy, you're being so good. You're standing so quietly and patiently. So you're likely to see an increase in standing quietly and patiently. This was one that I changed because which I forgot to change up at this first example, but standing politely. Politely is a construct. Politely is like, what is politely? Like dogs don't understand being polite. Dogs have no concept of manners or being polite or being respectful, anything like that. So I like to use descriptors that are less loaded. So I would opt to say standing quietly if I were to redo this. So another one, barking for attention. I want to reiterate, this is kind of a very simplistic form of understanding how reinforcement can impact behavior. There are a lot of other thoughts I have about these behaviors, but I think this is still a helpful exercise for understanding how we can or cannot influence behavior. So your dogs, let's say you have a puppy, they're 12 weeks old and they're entertaining themselves on the floor with a toy. And you're like, oh, finally, I can get some work done. Let me sneak away and ignore them for a second to get some work done. And the dog thinks, well, wait a second. That's kind of boring. I really want my human to engage with me. So if I watch my human leave when I get a toy, I might not be so inclined to play by myself anymore. Or let's say dog is barking at the guardian and you do engage with them when they bark, then you are likely to see an increase in the barking. Caveat with this though, again, I have evolved since making this, and I want to just say, like, we love when our dogs communicate with us. So I actually, yes, we would love if they maybe barked less or they found other ways to get our attention, but I think it's important that they can communicate with us. And also, one change I would make to this is that I think there is value if your dog barks to communicate. There's value in going over after the first bark instead of after 5 barks. So this is a little bit black and white when there's some nuance. But bottom line, if your dog's playing really nicely with a toy and you go over and you say, hey, you want me to play with you? Your dog might start to learn that, hey, playing quietly by myself means my human will come over. Let me do that a little bit more and see if I can get their attention that way by soliciting with the toy by myself. Okay, quick last one. And then I think we're going to be diving into some video examples pretty quickly. So your dog's walking with a loose leash. Now, walking with a loose leash is not a behavior. Behaviors that create loose leashes are dogs walking within 3 feet of us. A lot of times dogs walking by our side. So that's important to understand. Those are the behaviors that come along with loose leash walking. Now, if your dog's walking really nicely and you stop and your dog is really hoping to move forward and go investigate more sniffs, then there's a chance you're going to decrease loose leash walking because that loose leash walking did not lead to a positive outcome for the dog. So you might decrease the behavior. Now, if they pull to a spot to sniff and you follow them, you might get a little bit more pulling. But if your dog's walking with a loose leash, you say, hey, I really like this behavior, and you prompt them to go sniff, you might see an increase in that loose leash walking behavior because you're pairing a positive consequence with them getting to go sniff. A lot of these behaviors I would use food for a lot of this stuff to build the behavior that we're looking for, because it's going to be much easier than every single time your dog is walking on a loose leash trying to release them to go sniff. But in the concept of understanding how behavior and reinforcement go together, this is a helpful example. So when you have a yes mindset, meaning you are looking for, you're observing behavior from your dog, you're noticing when they do stuff that you like, do behaviors you like, and you say, yes, I like when you do that, that is actually going to combat unwanted behavior, because an argument with something like this, where I'm urging you and telling you the benefits of looking for desirable behavior, some might say, well, wait a second, what do I do when my dog does something wrong? Well, guess what? If they're busy doing stuff that you like, they're going to have way less reason and opportunity to do stuff you don't like. So you reinforce the heck out of walking with slack in the leash with a lot of food, a lot of access to the environment. So walking close enough to you that they're slack in the leash is heavily reinforcing for your dog. And also on a walk, you reward them, you capture every time they choose to look up at you. Remember, we're capturing here. We're not necessarily cueing, look or watch me, stuff like that, which you're welcome to do. But if you're going to have way more opportunity to reinforce if you're looking for when they choose to check in with you. Plus you have to talk a lot less. So you reinforce both of those. Well, hey, they're not going to really need to pull so much. They're not going to have a reason to pull on the leash, because these other replacement behaviors have been reinforced way more. There is always a moment of desirable behavior that you can reinforce. You just have to look for it. So not once, because it's always a work in progress, as you continue to practice training yourself to look for desirable behaviors that your dog does, you are going to start to notice way more when they are doing stuff that you like. And they are offering behaviors that you like, that you want to see more of, that you find desirable. You might also have noticed that, well, you actually might not have noticed, but I had to replace, I said a lot of good behavior, which you can see here. You have to have your good behavior glasses on. I left it here because it's catchy, but I actually swapped out all of the goods and bads in my presentation, because good and bad behavior kind of implies morality, and dogs are not moral. Behavior is not moral. Behavior is not good or bad. It is just behavior. Some of it might be really desirable to humans or really undesirable to humans. And that's why I like to use that label a lot more. But dogs have no concept of good and bad behavior. And so when we remove those labels, it can be much easier to understand what behavior we're really working with, where it fits into our human world. Again, it's desirable, it's unwanted, it's preferred, but behavior is not good and bad. But you can say, feel free to say, you have your good behavior glasses on, because I couldn't figure out something catchy else to say. Your desirable behavior glasses on. That doesn't sound cute. When it comes to capturing and building behavior, you want to start from the easiest success point and build from there. This does end up turning into a concept like shaping. So if you've heard the term shaping before, yes, this is what that is. If you haven't, don't worry about it. We're still going to talk about it in the concept of capturing. And so, for example, maybe you start by rewarding your dog for just showing brief eye contact. Great, because that's all they can do. But the more you reward, the more you work towards an end behavior of maybe turning away from another dog, where the brief eye contact does lead you to, through careful and robust capturing, the behavior of turning away from another dog. And initially, they can't turn away from another dog. That's too hard. But hey, they can look at you for a second. We'll take that and we'll go from there. Colleen and Clark Reed asks, any thoughts on whether to use a clicker during walks, then treat, or saying yes, like in the video, then treat? So the question is basically clicker versus verbal marker. Yes. A marker says, yes, I like that behavior. Here comes your treat. The dog really wants the treat, but we put the marker in there so that we can be a little bit more precise with our timing. I do not have a preference for the most part. If clickers can be really nice and clear and crisp and precise to the dog, which is great, but I also totally understand that I'm already asking you to bring a whole bunch of treats with you. So if you feel like you can't do the clicker, that's totally fine. So my answer is either one. I use them pretty interchangeably. Just remember, every time you mark with either clicker or yes, you give that treat. Now, quickly, as we dive into how to use capturing, it's important to understand that you do want to control the environment to make sure that the choices you're looking for are more likely to happen. In positive reinforcement dog training, we really aim to give a lot of choices to our dogs. And also, we like to be thoughtful about the environment so that maybe they have a handful of choices instead of endless. And a few of those choices are the ones we're looking for. So, for example, you keep your dog on leash instead of letting them run wild if they are unlikely to come back to you. If they're on leash, you've got more opportunities to reinforce them for, I don't know, looking at you, walking near you, putting behind a baby gate. You have more opportunity probably for capturing 4 on the floor, being not calm, but, giving you microseconds of standing instead of jumping when guests come in. Window film, you're more likely to get quiet if instead of barking, although this is always an interesting example because there's a big hole with the window film. But this prevents dogs from, seeing out and barking at a ton of stuff. So you're more likely to get behaviors like maybe lying on the bed instead of barking out the window, or coming and joining you on the couch, or being able to be called away from the window. Managing the environment prevents a lot more opportunities for reinforcing desirable choices. Counters or the kitchen, preventing access to the counters gives you a lot more opportunities to, maybe you put a bed right next to the counter while also putting a gate up, and so they don't jump, they instead lie on their bed. Gives you a lot of behavior to reinforce. I believe on Your Dog's Friend, a whole webinar about management. These things, like I said, this is called management. Gates, leashes, tethers, closed doors, pens, window film, all that stuff. I love management. And I highly recommend, if this is intriguing to you, go check out that webinar, because it's basically can help you a lot without doing a lot of training. That really should have been the title of my management webinar, is No Time to Train, Manage. Oh, another one, tethering. So with the counter, you can gate them off, or maybe you can tether them and give them something to chew on and settle on. A lot of management options to prevent the likelihood that unwanted behavior occurs and increase the chances the behavior you're looking for occurs. All right, we're going to dive into a bunch of videos. Now, just so you know, these are unknown and known dogs. So some of them are clients, some of them I don't know. I think some of them I'm using a clicker. So like we just talked about, the clicker is what's marking the behavior I like, and then I'm always following it up with a treat. Same thing with the word yes. And these are all short training sessions. We don't have to work for so long to accomplish this stuff. These are ways to show you what capturing looks like in the context, yes, of a training session. But this is going to help you start to train your brain on what to look for when your dog offers behaviors without being cued by you. Okay. So this is a dog named Red, and you're going to see me cueing him with his name to follow me. And then you're going to see me just moving away, and he chooses to follow me, both of which I'm going to reward.
Red. Yes. Red.
So sure, he responded to his name, but how lovely to have a dog who follows you and responds to you, whether you say their name or not. So the second half of that video, I was capturing him following me, whereas at the beginning, I was cueing him to follow me. Now, any dog training nerds out there, yes, there are cues happening. My body moving is a cue. My orientation is a cue. Like, dogs are picking up on cues from the environment, but the traditional cues of verbal and hand signals are not occurring from me. I am waiting for him to offer behavior and reinforcing it. Here I am using clicker training, capturing, to build attention in this shelter dog. I have no relationship with this dog. I don't know him at all. And I am going to use only basically my food and my clicker to build attention from him. So this continues to go on. I'm going to see. I think I start moving a bit, maybe. Oh, I reset away. So a dog can't respond to cues. If you are going to use cues with your dog, a dog can't respond to cues if they're not looking at you and paying attention. So you just watched me in about a minute get this dog's pretty undivided attention without saying any words to him. And there is so much benefit to that because, like we talked about before, these default behaviors, when you capture a dog choosing to pay attention to you, it can often become a default behavior that they do regardless of what information they've gotten, because they know generally it leads to positive consequences like you see here. So that happened quickly, but these are stills from all those videos. From that video, and you can see the behaviors I was capturing. So the dog orienting to me, the dog turning back to me after he went to get a treat, the dog looking up at me. And so if this last video, if you were thinking to yourself, well, wait a second, she's just giving the dog treats. Well, no, actually, look at all these wonderful behaviors that I was reinforcing. Amelia asks, what are your thoughts on differentiating a captured behavior that is rewarding and desirable in one context, but not so much in another? An example, we want the dog to follow us all the time when we're outside, but we don't want a dog to follow us in every corner of the house all the time. Amelia, this is a great question. And the good news is that dogs are very keen on conditions. So they understand what behaviors and what conditions lead to what consequences. So under the conditions of training, so maybe we have our treat pouch on, or we're in our training position, dogs understand certain behaviors get reinforced in those conditions. But when we're kind of hanging out on the couch and the TV is on, that different reinforcers are at play and they're not coming from us. Unless you want specific behaviors under those conditions and you do reinforce it, your dog's going to learn really quickly what conditions are linked to what reinforcers for certain behaviors. Ken Ramirez has this really funny video about end of session signals, which is different than what you're asking about, but it's a similar concept where, you know, people are so worried that the dog's just going to follow you around forever. And he has clips of him like sleeping and the dog's just staring at him, and like eating dinner and the dog's just sitting and staring at him. And that, you know, we have this fear that dogs are going to, you know, just offer these behaviors 100% of the time. And the good news is they have a wide repertoire of alternative behaviors and access to other reinforcers. So I don't think you have to worry necessarily about good stuff happening too much, good behavior, desirable behaviors happening too much or in the wrong context, would be my opinion. Here you're going to see why capturing is so critical for the skill of loose leash walking. Again, I'm not going to say anything, and you can see where this behavior goes. Now, this dog being brand new to training, I have to keep a very high rate of reinforcement because he doesn't necessarily care much about me, or he has a lot of other stuff he could want to do in this environment. Go check out, like he does here, you know, check out sniffs, look around the room, investigate. So yes, I have to reward and capture this behavior quite frequently to keep him with me, but you can already see me rewarding a little bit less frequently. So it built a little bit of duration there, and I wasn't having to click and treat as frequently. But again, the behaviors associated with loose leash walking, pretty much walking within, you know, 2 feet of me, next to me, by capturing those behaviors, I didn't have to say heel, 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 heel. He was just starting to do it more and more because I was capturing it. Now, this is capturing check-ins, which check-ins are defined as a dog orienting to you, looking at you, coming up to you. Capturing check-ins helps to build off-leash reliability dramatically because it allows us to provide positive consequences outside of just our recall cue. If you're out with your dog for 30 minutes and maybe you call them 2 or 3 times, give them a treat, that's good. But what's better, in my opinion, to build behavior of reliability off leash, what's better is, sure, you call them 3 times and give them a treat within that 30 minutes, but then they check in with you 10 other times and you slip them a treat. You've now reinforced them 13 times for being near you, responding to you, instead of 3. Now, this is a somewhat of well, it's about a minute, and there's some downtime in between, but that's all the more reason to show what it looks like when a behavior is offered instead of cued.
Hey, bud.
So this is check-in number 1. These dogs are off leash. They can go wherever they want, and I do not call them.
Boy. Good girl. Good girl. I want to know what your brother got.
So I'm just standing still. I didn't say
Good choice.
anything.
Hi.
And he chose to
Boy.
come up and follow where I was going.
Boy.
Of course, I rewarded that. So lovely. This is me capturing a dog staying near me around distractions. So when you think about dogs and their behavior around people or dogs, whether it's reactivity or just excitement or jumping, anything. Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm going to pause briefly to answer Kathy's question because it's related to the previous slide. Kathy asks about recall. or being off leash, I should say. If the dog hasn't been trained to look at you on walks, do you begin treating with commands to get initial result? This is a really great question about captured behavior in general. The behavior you want to capture has to occur in order for you to capture it. You have a few different ways to do that. You can, well, first of all, I always recommend starting teaching behaviors at home, whether you're capturing or training cues, whatever. So before you try anything off leash, absolutely, you would want to build a reinforcement history for looking at you, following you, choosing to come up to you at home and in easier environments before you take it anywhere harder, more challenging. And yes, totally. Will I remind a dog that I'm there? The thing about utilizing, capturing, and applying it and utilizing all the benefits, it's not that you can't cue. You absolutely certainly can. I totally remind my dogs of where I am, or if I use cues, which you'll see in a couple of videos. And also, I reinforce the heck out of them when they make choices that I'm looking for. So yes, totally. Can you call your dog over, positive interrupter, redirect them to you, of course, but be on the lookout for any other time they choose to do that. And if they're not choosing to do that, and you're really having to rely on your voice to get them to engage with you, that might be some data to you that they would benefit from capturing and building attention and focus in easier environments. Great question, Kathy. Thank you. Now, circling back to this video of this adorable little puppy. This is, I'm capturing this dog choosing to stay with me when a person approaches. I don't say leave it. I don't say their name. I don't say stay. I just say, wow, thank you for sticking with me. I really like that. Here's reinforcement for it. He's learning his manners. Someone's off screen, you'll see them walk by. What I think is so interesting, and nobody's really said this to me, well, not in a while, but someone might say, why are you rewarding that dog for nothing? And I would say, precisely, because he did nothing, even though that person walked by. Now, I want you to notice capturing one of the clicks. I'm going to pause it. So, man. Okay. Here you can see the puppy's eyes lock on the person. And I actually click that because that's the moment when this puppy could have said, ooh, a person, let me dart towards them. And instead he chose, because I wasn't giving any cues, he chose to stay in position. So you better believe I'm reinforcing the heck out of that. I'm not even waiting for him to look back at me, or there are plenty of other desirable behaviors he could have also offered. Again, looking at me, looking away from the person. But in this moment, I chose to capture him, noticing the person and staying put. What a delight. So here I'm capturing, keeping all four paws on the floor during a greeting. Again, I'm not cueing anything. I'm just capturing when this dog makes some really wonderful choices during a greeting. I might give some cues to call the dog away. I'm not quite sure. We'll find out together. Good, perfect. Oh, perfect. Good boy. Good, thank you. Good job, buddy. He's like, yeah, I don't care about this person. Good boy. Let's go. Come on, Bridge. Good boy, touch. Okay, so yes, that was a let's go cue, but you'll notice during the greeting, I am just capturing when he stands still, even as the person pets him. Good, thank you. Good job, Bridge. Good boy. Good job. Okay, Bridget, let's go. Touch. Yes. Yeah, so a cue to keep him moving away. And I think that actually showed really nicely how I will use cues and capturing even fluidly within one training session. That I don't have to ask him stand. I don't have to say stay or anything like that. As he's standing for this greeting, I can go ahead and click and treat him. Okay, this is an interesting one. I worked with that shelter dog for too long, and surprise, he got frustrated and started biting his leash, which operator error, again, it was a lot of training for him, and he did lovely for all those other demos. And this is towards the end of the session, and he's starting to leash bite. So watch how I decrease the behavior of leash biting, because I am instead reinforcing other behaviors to replace it. And this is a longer one. We might not watch the whole thing. We'll see. Biting, 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 playing a great game of tug. I just ignore. I'm just waiting. I'm going to wait for my opportunity. That was an leash, not in mouth, mouth empty. That's the behavior I am reinforcing. I am capturing mouth empty, because if a mouth is empty, a leash cannot be in it. I go to pick up the leash. He says, not yet. Again, I'm continuing to reinforce mouth empty as I futz with the leash. So now I'm moving the leash more to get it ready in my hand. And now I'm transitioning more to capturing the behavior of kind of standing and because I don't like saying things as I'm capturing him not going for the leash, not doing something is not a behavior. So instead I'm capturing looking at the leash, mouth empty, standing. These are all behaviors that accomplish him not going for the leash. I'm even making it harder and moving the leash around because I like to. So again, didn't say anything, got to the point where I was able to take the leash out of, I didn't take it out of his mouth, but I got it out of his mouth because he dropped it, picked it up, and we're back to nice, happy training. And I didn't have to. I mean, this is an example of this dog doesn't know drop. I couldn't rely on the cue drop or leave it or something like that in this instance because this dog didn't know those behaviors. So I had to capture the behavior. Amelia mentioned talking about puppies. I feel like there's a huge benefit of capturing during socialization for puppies to people, places, things. More often, the creation of a positive conditioned emotional response is heavy-handed with cues and treats, as opposed to allowing the dog to choose to have a positive experience. And I think Amelia brings up a really great point that with capturing, because we're not cueing and because we're nice and keyed in with our observation skills, we are, the dog can tell us a lot because they're not necessarily responding to cues. They're just offering the behavior that they're capable of in that moment and that they're choosing to do in that moment. And that could be really good information for us. So we can all have a little exercise here of seeing what behavior is being captured here with this Icelandic sheepdog puppy. Now I realize that was a little tricky because there were a lot of clicks happening in the background. So I apologize because there's a lot of puppies being clicked and treated in this room. But essentially this trainer is getting a ring on and off the puppy, which is preparing this puppy for comfortably having a collar put on and off. And the behavior being captured is sitting still, essentially, while putting this collar on and off, or ring on and off. And so the click occurred while the puppy stood still as the collar went on and off. But again, the trainer wasn't saying sit, the trainer wasn't saying stay. They were just capturing when the puppy would sit still as the collar went on and off. Essentially, the goal with capturing is to create strong default behaviors that your dog is happy to offer without being prompted, verbally or with a traditional hand signal. So watch this dog as we're on a trail together. So that dog could go anywhere on the trail. He could do whatever he wanted. And he chose to come trot alongside me in what many people would call heel position. To him, that's the, I hang out here a lot because food shows up position. But that is the power of capturing. Yes, I could and would put this behavior on cue to cue it when I need it. And also I would capture it liberally and often so that it's a behavior that he chooses, whether I ask him to do it or not, because it's safety. That's nice and safe. It's easy. It gives us some ways to communicate with each other. It's just, there's so many benefits to it. Takeaways from the concept of capturing and this talk. You will see more of the behaviors that you reinforce. You can reward, and more importantly, you can reward behaviors you didn't ask for. I think a lot of times, you know, our dog will offer a sit really nicely. Like, we love sitting, can be a great replacement behavior to a lot of jumping, other things. And we go, well, wait a second, we didn't ask you to do that. And then we get into this whole, oh, you're training me to give you a treat. Well, actually, no, we love when your dog makes that choice to sit instead of jumping on your counter. What a great opportunity to reinforce them and see that in the future. Embracing a yes mindset where you seek out desirable behaviors. Oh no, I didn't fix that one. Good behaviors, ick. When you seek out desirable behaviors and reinforce them, can really change a lot in your life with your dog. It can improve their behavior. It can build a much stronger, more positive relationship. It can just, I think it's just a much stronger, more positive foundation with your dog than constantly seeing when they do something wrong and trying to correct them. And speaking of undesirable behaviors, proactively replacing undesirable behaviors by reinforcing desirable ones is another way to work on those behaviors that maybe you don't like so much from your dog. You can swap those behaviors out. You just pick which one you want instead and reinforce that. Again, a little simplistic, but really there's not so much more to it than that. And just keep in mind, if there's something your dog is doing that you don't like, what do you want them to do instead? How can you teach that behavior, capture it, make it reinforcing for your dog? All right, who has questions? We've got a pretty small group tonight, so I think anybody who had questions probably asked them, but definitely go ahead and drop any questions in the chat. Otherwise, these are my, this is my information, and especially Instagram. I would love all of you connect with me there. I'm very active over there. Is my website and email. I'm going to leave this up for just a second, and then I will talk into the screen to answer some questions. All right. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and talk to you all. Linda, you asked, how do you reconcile reinforcing a behavior that is offered when not asked for, so one that is on cue, with developing stimulus response? So I'm guessing, Linda, that you're talking about stimulus control, and when we want to make sure that behaviors aren't offered uncued. Is that what you mean? You can just type into the chat. So yes, reinforcing when behaviors are offered uncued, I would say for 99% of pet parents is totally fine. In some cases, when you're working on stimulus control and you don't want the behavior to be offered, yes, that is obviously much more challenging. That's totally fine, Linda. Okay, making sure. So working on stimulus control with a cue. So say you teach your dog to sit. Stimulus control means that basically your dog only sits when you cue them to sit. They don't sit when you cue something else. They don't sit when they haven't heard the cue sit. In my opinion, stimulus control is less important for most pet parents, which I think is kind of the audience here and a lot of us who work with clients. Stimulus control is not so important. But if you were working on stimulus control, then that would be something I would address more in a training session, and then obviously don't reinforce the offered behaviors. But kind of two different worlds. It's like my Karen Pryor Academy students. I'm thinking about, yes, them working on their stimulus control and then the dog offering behavior. We wouldn't want to go down that road. Great question. Chantal says, in the example with the dog biting the leash, if the dog had restarted biting the leash when you were moving it around, what do you do? This is an excellent question. The dog had the leash in his mouth. I worked to get the leash out of his mouth, and then I was making it harder by even moving the leash around. By the way, why was I doing that? I guess to prove a point. If the dog had gone back to biting the leash in that example, I would have taken that as data. That was too hard for the dog. I went too fast. I asked for too much. He was not capable of meeting my criteria at that time. In that moment, I'm in a safe environment. I would have done what I did at the beginning and dropped it again and started from square one and moved it a little bit more slowly and not made it as hard. Because anytime my learner makes an error or fails, to me, that's data that my training was unclear, too hard, unachievable, and I adjust accordingly. Great question. Okay, so Colleen is asking a specific question about their dog, but I think this will be helpful for everyone, so let's chat about it. Our GSD barks at the neighbors when he's in our yard outside. Sounds like we could reward him when he's calm and with us outside, find the desirable yard off-leash behaviors, and find a way to have him check in with us when the neighbor is outside, rather than bark and look scary. Ding, ding, ding. Totally. I love that you have evaluated the behavior you don't want, barking at the fence line, and you've thought about, well, what behaviors do I want instead? Checking in with you, approaching you, responding to you. What I might also do is notice the neighbor calmly or quietly. Calm is, again, a label. We would want to define what that looks like. Now, this, though, is where we think about, how do I get those behaviors? Because if a dog has a long history of barking at something and we just show up to the environment and hope the dog doesn't bark, that's not going to go so well. So instead, you want to think of conditions. Maybe you go out on leash. Maybe you stand at the fence next to your dog. Timing is also really important so that you can capture the moment your dog notices, but before they start barking. That's where that small success point, where can they be successful? It might just be noticing the neighbor for a second, or they just come outside for a second and go back inside, have a positive experience. So yes, totally on the right track. The nuances and how to apply it might be best worked out one-on-one with a pro trainer, but you're totally on the right track. Jen says, I run a daycare on 3 acres. Oh, interesting. Okay, so dogs are doing great with recall, eye contact, etc., but I'm having trouble getting the dogs to wait to be released into the yard when I open any door. They all want to run out at once. I think I just have to continue going slowly, rewarding and be consistent. Yes, Jen, totally. I think anytime our learners aren't being successful, how do we make it easier? I think it's a really challenging environment you're working with, because you have a lot of dogs and you have a lot of emotions we might label as excitement, enthusiasm around that. Best case scenario, I would work one at a time with each dog. But yes, I think definitely slowing it down, lowering your criteria. And that would be an example of, sure, we would love to capture their stillness waiting by letting them out, but it might be a better example of doling out some food if they wait and then letting them out. So tricky, but I think consistency and being really clear about your criteria, that's always helpful and important when it comes to teaching a new skill. Is, does my learner truly understand what I'm looking for? And do they understand what they're working for. So access to the yard. How do I make sure that they understand what does waiting look like? Does it just standing still? Do you want them sitting? Making sure you define that and make it very clear to them what's getting them access to the yard. All right. Well, those are some great questions. Thank you again so much. I really appreciate you being here. Hopefully I'll see you on Instagram or maybe next time with your dog's friend. Thank you all so much.
Juliana, thanks so much for presenting such a great webinar. It was
Yeah.
so helpful. Lots of great questions too.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone who joined us this afternoon. That concludes our webinar.